IB Nation Sports Talk. It's rapid fire. It's Friday, along with my second and third favorite co-hosts. I'm Sean Stiers.
Whoa. And who occupies the first slot?
You know, I told you the rankings were subject to change.
Fair.
And, you know, I've started working with Ryan the last couple of weeks. And, you know.
There it goes.
See, I think I'm not going to speculate, but I am. I think I'm still solid at number 2. So I think Jesse dropped 2 spots.
It's a matter of where. Yeah, that's
maybe right. After today, I'm at number 3.
Oh, these two just have a way of poking at me all the time. That's what's going on.
I just read your text, by the way. Oh, there you go.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
That's right. And here we are.
Here we are.
The rankings. Maybe I'll put up the full rankings next week sometime. I haven't done a show with Sean Davis in a while. Maybe I need to do that, kind of refresh my memory, and then reassess the rankings after that. So
I mean, I did a show with Brian the other day. So, you know, he had to slip in to the night show because somebody bailed on me the day of.
Oh,
that
really?
Wasn't me.
Maybe Jesse's falling on everybody's ranking.
You know,
I guess so.
All right. Well, we've got a lot to get to today, and apparently Jesse has to get out of here early tonight. So, whatever. We got to talk with new offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock this afternoon, and also freshly promoted linebackers coach Max Bullough. So that was very interesting and very, brisk 40 minutes or so that we got to spend between the two of them. So really,
nice.
Got a lot of different insights. So we're going to start the show off with some comments from each of them. We're going to start first with Denbrock, who did meet with the media. First time since coming back to Notre Dame. Third time in his career he's at Notre Dame. He was asked why, and he talked about being from Michigan and, some of the family stuff. His wife is from Buffalo, New York. When he was asked why he decided to come back to Notre Dame once again. And then he kind of, he talked about Marcus Freeman as well.
I have a true belief in Marcus Freeman and his vision and what he believes in. And, from working with him and the years we spent together at Cincinnati, watching him and his leadership abilities and the inspiration that he gave to the players that were under his charge was something that was attractive to be a part of. So
Vince, you hear that from veteran offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock. You've been a head coach before. How important do you think it is to hear that, as one of the major factors for Mike Denbrock coming back here to Notre Dame?
I mean, buy-in from your assistant coaches, right? It's absolutely huge, and you want to have assistant coaches that are going to echo what you want and the program that you want to have and all of that. And if Mike Denbrock, did what he did to come from LSU to Notre Dame because he believes in what Marcus Freeman is wanting to do and is doing, I think that says a lot. I think that says it says volumes because he has been around the block. He's been coaching for 30 plus years. He's seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And he knows who Marcus Freeman is from their time at Cincinnati together. He's seen from afar what he's done at Notre Dame. And so he believes in it. And if you've got a guy like Mike Denbrock, who, by the way, was in charge of the number 1 offense, had the Heisman Trophy winner, all these different things,
right? You
get that guy to buy in, you're in great shape.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Vince is saying. When you have, assistant coach that's willing to leave a really good situation down at LSU and then come over to Notre Dame, I think it only shows, one, his confidence in Marcus Freeman, like Vince said, and then overall, his confidence in the program, that all of the pieces are ultimately there. And, he said the overall goal is to, compete for and win a national championship. And so when I heard that statement, to me, it sounded like he likes his chances better at Notre Dame than he does at LSU. And if you're a fan, that has to be something to be excited about.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that both, like when Al Golden came in the door and he talked about how when he was watching Marcus Freeman's introductory press conference, maybe it was the questions that Vince was asking Marcus Freeman at the introductory press conference, but Marcus Freeman, caught his ear, and, Al Golden was like, that's a guy I could get on board with. And then he actually had the opportunity to get on board with him. And he came over here. This is a veteran guy who's been around, been a head coach himself. Now, Mike Denbrock hasn't been a head coach himself, but he's been around as well. These are both guys who could pretty much be Marcus Freeman's dad. Al Golden is a little bit younger, but, like if he was a teenager, like it's theoretically it's possible. Like they're both in that age range where, between the experience they have, like Marcus Freeman is considerably younger than them, but to hear them talk about Marcus Freeman the way they do and to have the kind of buy-in in someone who really is that much younger than them, again, the age difference between Golden and Freeman isn't quite as big. Denbrock is like 60, Al Golden is 54.
Yeah. Okay.
Still, my point is these guys have been around, and to have both of them have so much buy-in into Marcus Freeman as a head coach, and for both of them to really fully be content, it sounds like, because that's something that Mike Denbrock talked about today as well, to fully be content with where he is. I think it speaks loud volumes, especially considering where Denbrock has been the last few years. And again, considering the track record and the history that Al Golden has, having been a head coach and having been in the NFL and everything else himself. I think it's huge.
Yep. Yeah, I'm excited for it, frankly. And I think that, from the outside looking in, and you've got two coordinators with all the experience and the history, just like you mentioned, having those two guys in charge of each side of the ball. And then you've got, Marcus Freeman, this dynamic, young, energetic head coach who, his image is all of everything, right? I mean, that's who he is. People know the program with him at the helm. And then he's got these two bookends, basically just holding it down. They know what's up. They've been around. They know, and they've been successful. It's the best of all worlds, frankly. I mean, on paper, and we'll see how it translates to the field and everything like that. But on paper, how can you not be excited with the way things are trending with Notre Dame and their coaching staff?
Exactly.
Yeah, you have two very experienced coordinators, throughout multiple levels of college and NFL. And then you have a really young, kind of relevant coach that's able to establish relationships with players. And I think together what is that recipe going to look like? And I'm really excited for it.
Right.
Yeah.
So Denbrock was also asked about what his relationship is like with Brian Kelly, because of course he, I guess not left him at the altar, but pretty close. He left him down there, and he kind of did leave him at the altar. He had that contract extension, and they, the contract extension never got signed. And I guess I should I'm not going to play that soundbite because it was really short, not a whole lot of extra details. But Denbrock did talk about the fact that they had an agreement on the 3-year extension. The board of trustees apparently had to approve it down there at LSU, and it hadn't quite made it through that process. And then all this comes up. He gets the call from Marcus Freeman, and he moves on. But what is that relationship like with Brian Kelly?
Yeah, we're friends and have always been friends. We I think have a relationship that spans over 30 some years, and that won't change. I don't know that he was real happy with my decision, but I think he understood it, and he knows the reasons why. But I have a lot of respect for Brian, and I consider him a friend and always will.
So do you guys think they're trading Christmas cards?
I think you can make a case that Denbrock would send one. I don't think Kelly would send one back.
Their secretaries do all that stuff anyway, so it depends on if they get crossed off the list or not.
Right.
But look, it was very obvious without saying it that Brian Kelly was pissed when he left. I can only imagine being a fly on the wall.
He's pissed about everything, really.
Well, fair enough. I mean,
what doesn't make him upset?
I don't know, bad round of golf, like a good round of golf, I should say. I don't know, but I would have loved to be a fly on the wall when Mike Denbrock knocks on the door and is like, "Hey, Brian, I'm heading back to Notre Dame." Like I would have loved to see the response that he would have gotten. You know, I
would have loved to just see that face in the moment of what, you know, because you can't control that sort of stuff.
Oh, like, are you effing kidding me?
I know.
It'd been great.
I know. I mean, that's not quite a word salad, but Mike Denbrock said things without saying things, basically.
Absolutely.
And like, you know, the whole, I don't know that he was that, it obviously kind of catches you when he says, well, I don't think he was that happy when I left, but he knows the reasons that I left. He didn't expand upon the reasons that he left. We have a good idea of, you know, some behind the scenes, you know, not just, you know, hey, an offer was made and whatever else. But, you know, as Rabid Nile Chihuahua says, classy answer, no shade. Moving on.
It's a great
interesting
name,
handle, by the way. Rabid Nile Chihuahua.
Remember why, right? You remember why that came out? Was it you and I that doing the show together?
I don't remember that. I don't remember anything about Rabid Nile Chihuahuas. Right? What's that?
It was me. I said I was trying to come up with some sort of analogy, and it. Instead of coming up with a fish, I said Chihuahua. So that's where that comes from, by the way. Yeah.
The Rabid Nile Chihuahuas. Okay.
I meant the fish that bite you. Help me out here. Like
piranhas?
Piranhas. That's what I was looking for. I still couldn't find it.
You were trying to say piranha and you said Chihuahua.
And I said Chihuahua. Okay. Like that was the thought process that was in my head.
It rhymes, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's terrible on my end, obviously, but that was freaking awesome. But yes, the fact that he said he wasn't happy, but he knows my reasons, that means he was pissed and doesn't agree with my reasons.
Yeah.
But
you know look, these guys do have a friendship that goes back.
Oh yeah.
But, you know, part of I think I counted when there's a story up, by the way, at irishbreakdown.com about Mike Denbrock and some other thoughts from him from today as well. But I think I went back between Grand Valley State, Notre Dame, and LSU, Brian Kelly and Mike Denbrock. Denbrock at least had coached under Brian Kelly for like 17 years, I believe, something like that. You know, pretty good chunk, obviously. And look, part of the reason that he left Notre Dame was Brian Kelly had to shake up the staff. Mike Denbrock wanted to stay, wanted to be, you know, the offensive coordinator here, but things had to move. Now, again, how much of that was necessarily Brian Kelly's fault as much as, hey, he was told he obviously had to make some major shakeups on the coaching staff for him to basically keep his job. But then other things, you know, Denbrock went back to him at LSU and it worked out for both of them. And so the fact that, to me, again, like the fact that Denbrock has been around Brian Kelly that much, a guy who's been around for a long time, guy who, you know, quote unquote friends, but he would rather come back here to Notre Dame, no matter how many different reasons you add for, you know, I'm closer to home, my wife's closer to home. Marcus Freeman was a big factor in this whole thing.
No doubt.
And, you know, like, it's like he's not Brian Kelly. I don't know.
I mean, okay. How about we stay classy with, or I'll stay classy with how I will phrase this. Brian Kelly and Marcus Freeman coach and interact with people
completely
very differently. Okay. So that means something. Like we've all been in jobs where you have a boss that you don't really enjoy working for. It's not necessarily a bad job, but like your interaction on a daily basis, that can wear on you after a while. And I'm not saying that was necessarily the case, but I am saying I understand it if it was.
Sure.
You know, we've all been happier at jobs where we get along with our boss. I mean, just, you know, and where the boss treats you with respect on a daily basis and, you know, actually says hi to you and, you know, so we'll see.
Well, and there are bosses, and again, we don't know the interpersonal relationships. Sorry to cut you off there, Jess, but you know, there's the boss who you only hear from when things are going wrong, and there's the boss who you actually, you know, have some kind of actual personal relationship and you can communicate with on a day-to-day basis without something going wrong to hear from him. And it seems to me like like Marcus Freeman is the latter and Brian Kelly is more the former.
Agreed.
So go ahead, Jess. Sorry.
Yeah, all I was going to add was it was probably, when Denbrock was making this decision, I would have to say that, the frustration of having a Heisman winning quarterback and one of the top offenses in the country, but not enough of a defense to help you out. Like, that had to get frustrating of doing your part. And I think that's where the difference is at Notre Dame right now is Al Golden's defense is strides ahead of whatever LSU would put on the field next season. So again, I think that has to weigh into it as well. It's like, what's the point of having this high prolific, one of the top offenses in the country when, we can't even get a defense to stop anywhere. And so I feel like that had to play a part of it too. It honestly is like the defensive rebuild was going to take longer at LSU than what it was at Notre Dame.
No, that's a good point, Jesse,
really
because he actually did bring up Al Golden's defense, not necessarily as a factor in the decision, but just at one point he brought up Al Golden's defense. It's like, I'm doing my thing and we've got that Al Golden defense. He's doing his thing. And, that whole thing, that did come up today. So I think that's at least, in his mind.
How could that not be part of the decision-making process, though? I'm not saying it was maybe 1, 2, or 3, but if you're how could it not be when you're just looking at it from a straight up X's and O's, winning games or losing games, seeing one of the best defenses in the country on the other side with what you currently have? That has to be part of it. And I think that's a really good point.
Vince DK with a very controversial thought here. Jesse is secretly saying he's tired of carrying the show.
He's on the bottom for a reason. He's holding us up.
That's right, with those broad shoulders.
That's right.
That he's got.
There was another question in here, and I don't know if we started, but somebody asked who would make the best college football player. There's only one of us on this screen that ever was a college.
Who actually played?
I think he was talking about the video game. The video game.
Oh, gotcha. I was gonna say, like, that first question was hands down. That is not even a debate. You kidding me? Now, the video game version, we might have to, see how that one plays out.
When we talked about the video game thing, Vince and I, when it first came out, we talked about that we need to do an IB
100%.
like dynasty. Like, we all need to get a team and play a little bit, and we can keep a little like standings of the IB crew. I think that might be fun.
I like that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to have to audible here a little bit because I'm missing one of my cuts. So I'm going to go to the second cut and bring that one in here first. So Max Bullough, got to talk to him as well. He was a grad assistant as linebackers coach last year, and now he is the full-time linebackers coach. And so one of the responsibilities that come along with being a full-time assistant compared to being a grad assistant is you're a recruiting guy now. You're off-campus recruiting. Like, obviously, when guys come on campus, you can talk to them and stuff like that. But recruiting is part of it now, too. So he discussed kind of who he is as a recruiter. And here's what he had to say.
I think recruiting here is very unique. One, because it's Notre Dame. So that takes, you already have kids that are either going to want to go or not go right away. So that's half the list, or can't go.
Right.
I think there's guys at the top of the lists that they're either Notre Dame kids or they're not, first of all. So I think it kind of simplifies it a little bit. No, it's not that simple, but it's a little bit smaller pool than you're used to. But I'm just as honest and direct as I can be. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to do it. I could try to be fake, and then halfway through I run out of stuff to say. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, so I'm honest with them. I'm like, listen, I tell them about why I like their tape. I say, if you're going to come to Notre Dame, you got to be willing to challenge yourself all day, not just at practice. You got to be able to do it on the field and academically, and some people can't do that. Mm-hmm. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine. Let's just get it out of the way now. So I'm just as honest as I can be, and I tell them about the different ways we develop guys and how kind of some examples of our players now. I'm just honest and direct, just like I am as a coach.
I thought that was hysterical when he was like, I can try to be fake, but I'd run out of things to say. And then what am I going to do at that point? What do you guys think?
He makes a great point as far as I'm concerned. Like, I feel the exact same way, maybe for slightly different reasons, but like, if you try to be fake and you try to say things that aren't necessarily true or whatever, like, I forget what I say. So it's like, hey, if I'm honest all the time, I'm not going to mess up and
You don't have to remember what
right.
you lied
Exactly.
about.
It's like, be honest, hey, I don't like your film. And so this probably isn't going to happen. Or, this is what I like. And this is where you can be successful. And you remind me of this or whatever the case may be. But I can tell you, and I'm sure Jesse can tell you as well, because he went through the recruiting process, right? And so did you as a dad. Like, direct and honest, man, is what I'm looking for. Like, if you're not interested for whatever reason, tell me so we can move on to something else. But that's how I feel about recruiting. Don't string me along and do all these different things. Like, be direct and honest. If it's positive, awesome. If it's not, great. There's 129 or so other Division I schools that I can talk to. Like, I like that, frankly.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that too. During the process, I wish people were more upfront and honest about, whether they thought this was going to work or not. And I think
real quick, not to cut you off, but who was one of the most honest people with you up front about what he thought that you should be in college?
Probably Brian, I think.
Yeah. When Brian was still coaching, he recruited Jesse.
Driscoll?
Yeah.
Not knowing that Jesse was my son because we had worked together before that. But
no kidding.
When he was in Ohio, was it Defiance that he was at?
I believe it was Defiance.
Yeah. He contacted Jesse and was talking about, okay, this is sort of where I just thought that was
really
worth mentioning, since you talked about people being honest and upfront. Yeah.
I did not know that. We're going to have to dive into that at some point. I did not know that. And you spurned him and went someplace else.
That's right.
Well, it was just kind of the first time I heard that before. But now kind of looking back on it, I probably should have given more thought what he was saying.
Fair enough. Gosh, I'm intrigued now. We can save it for another time, but I'm intrigued.
And then I think the other thing that, being honest up front is good with is if you lie to them during the recruiting process and then you get on campus, you have a bunch of guys who are upset or
been lied to.
Yeah. And it's like you start going through the season and you're 2 years in or 2 semesters in, you're like, wow, this is nothing like what I was pitched. And then you got a bunch of guys who are sitting there stewing it out of frustration. And then honestly, that's why you see guys probably hit the portal is they were lied to or over exaggerated of what they would contribute and, all of it. And so I think being honest up front eliminates a lot of issues, in the present and, future potential problems as well.
Agreed.
Yeah. I mean, just standing there listening to Max Bullough and some of the things, one, he's very energetic guy. Obviously he's a young guy. This is his first full-time position. So he's excited about that. And we'll get to that in a second, but he just comes across as a very straight shooting guy. There was no BS. There was, we were talking about how Mike Denbrock is obviously a veteran. He's been at this for 3+ decades. And, he kind of worked his way around, the Brian Kelly thing there. Like if something similar had come up with Max Bullough, I'd be interested to see kind of what his soft shoe was like, because he doesn't seem to have that right now.
Well, you could tell, like, when he was talking, he obviously talks with his hands because he kept smacking the table. So he's obviously a very energetic guy, and that's what you want, because it's going to balance out, because there's a lot of balance, I feel like, on this staff. You've got some young energetic guys, you've got some older veteran guys. Like, there will be somebody on the staff that these recruits can relate to. Whether you gravitate towards that young and energetic, whether you gravitate more towards those quieter IQ type guys, like whatever the case may be, there's going to be somebody that any recruit can relate to in some form or fashion.
D-Rock Ira says Max was a heck of a player at Michigan State. Great job keeping him aboard. He was. I mean, really
I honestly remember him too, because he played in college right when I was kind of going through high school. And I don't know if Notre Dame was still playing Michigan State at that time at all. But I just remember, like,
they were back then. I think that was kind of the end of, like, the tail end.
As soon as I heard Bullough, the first thing I thought of was, didn't he play at Michigan State? Why is he at Notre Dame? But yeah, I just remember him being just like a year or two older than me, like in terms of like me in high school and him in college.
Well, and his grandfather played here at Notre Dame, and he talked about how, and it was his mom's father who passed away just a couple days before the Duke game, actually, season that Notre Dame played. But he talked about how his grandfather really wanted someone in the family to go to Notre Dame, and it never, him, his brother,
They all went to Michigan State.
They all went to Michigan State instead. And so when he was able to come here last year and even have that GA position, that meant a lot to his grandfather before he passed. And he talked about how proud he would have been, of him getting this full-time job and stuff like that. So that was pretty cool as well.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something. I know that he's officially the full-time linebackers coach this season, and last year by label or title, he was the GA linebackers coach. From my understanding, he basically ran the linebacker unit last season.
Hold on one second. We're going to get to that right now.
Jumping the gun.
Sorry. I don't know what these cuts say.
That's okay. That's right. Well, I mean, it was pretty quick when having to go to the press conference.
Yes.
Two people come back, cut and edit the quotes, and without, I guess I'm already into making the sausage, but then I had to transcribe some others to write some other stuff.
So it was that's a good point. Yeah.
It was just like, okay, let's
moving.
get it together as much as possible, and here's kind of an idea of what we're going to talk about today. So
it's super helpful when we find out about the media availability like the week of too.
Yeah, a couple days ago. So before Bullough came to Notre Dame, he was at Alabama, where he was a graduate assistant. Obviously, he came to Notre Dame as a graduate assistant. Kind of sounds like a lateral move, right? And I think maybe there were some people going, why would you leave Alabama to come to Notre Dame? And so one of the questions that Max Bullough, one of the other questions he was asked was the importance of the responsibilities that he got here at Notre Dame compared to what he had at Alabama in terms of this being a desirable job.
It's literally everything. I mean, it's literally it's the reason I'm standing here today. It's the reason I came to Notre Dame because it was, Coach Saban kind of got pissed that I left. He told me it's not a training ground because he thought it was a lateral move.
Yeah.
Well, you're still you guys know me as a linebacker coach here. Before last year, I was just a GA and I was good at it and all that. But this is what I love. This is what I do. I'm good on the computers and I got really good at it. But you guys see me out there. You guys that's what I do. That's who I am. And that's how I affect. And so that's really what you guys have seen that you didn't know I didn't really have before I got here.
So Jesse, any follow-ups to that? Go ahead.
Yeah. So again, I basically kind of, listened to some snippets today and my general takeaway was he was in charge of the linebackers last year, even though he was, the GA linebacker coach.
But that's what was so attractive about coming here was he was still a GA. Nick Saban's obviously got, a million guys and Nick Saban's going to do his Nick Saban stuff, but he was actually given responsibilities to coach the linebackers. That he wasn't just
kind of dissecting film or looking for tendencies or he was on the field working with players, going through position drills, actually coaching guys up, more hands-on. And so that makes more sense. And honestly, that gives me more ease about his role this season because he's already done a bunch of it before. It's not like he's being asked to go from, straight GA and hands off to, full-time linebackers coaching a bunch of and majority hands-on. And so I feel better about the situation knowing that he got introduced to more of that hands-on experience last season.
Well, and it was obvious, that's how they approached him. It's like, hey, we basically need a linebackers coach, but you're going to be, a GA in name only, essentially, but you're basically going to be the linebackers coach because we want to allow Al Golden to roam from position to position and all these different things. And anytime we were at practice, that's exactly what was happening. It was Max Bullough was coaching the linebackers and Al Golden would be there sometimes, but he would also be at other position groups. And there's not going to be a whole lot of difference at practice for the linebackers than there was last year. It's not going to be that much different. Maybe the car that he's driving might be a little different or something, but
he does get a much better parking space, he said. So
there you go. He gets a better parking place and probably a better car to put in it. And so obviously great for him, but there's not going to be much change for the linebacker room. There's just not.
I just think it's funny that you get a chance to piss off Nick Saban and you go from Alabama to Notre Dame. I mean, that's like
I mean,
not a
in
whole
this
lot of guys.
show-
Like a lot of guys can say they probably had a chance to piss off Brian Kelly, but to say you've ticked off Nick Saban,
I was going
is
to say,
like,
you took the words right out of my mouth. We talked about pissing off Brian Kelly and Nick Saban in the same show.
same show.
This is
That's right.
fantastic.
Yep, absolutely. And I'll tell you what, Jesse, you played linebacker, and again, you're just talking about just initial observation of getting to talk with Max Bullough and the energy and the passion and everything else that he has. Like, he's got that, like, I'm a linebacker, a little bit crazy, kind of, like glaze in his eyes. And I mean this in the best possible way.
Like one of his eyes is looking to the side a little bit.
Well, it's not quite like that. He's not quite shaded up to Nick Sirianni, with that look that he's got in his eyes, but maybe, 15%, or so below that. Like, he's got just the right amount. Like, this guy.
Well, I love that every cut of him, you see a circular 10 in his pocket. That is like, you guys can't find any other angle of this guy. Like, but to me, that goes along with the profile.
I did notice that as well.
As a linebacker, I feel like it's just like you were saying, like, just like that kind of toughness, like, just like glazed over eyes as he's staring at you.
Yeah, it's like those old shots of Mike Singletary, and like the frenzy that Mike Singletary, like that's the kind of just sort of that I'm talking about with Max Bullough. It's the good kind. It's a good kind.
So I also kind of I was eavesdropping today, preparing myself. It was a slower afternoon, so I was kind of looking at the Max Bullough stuff, and I thought something that was interesting that was brought up is he talked about, the importance of Kaiser and why he's kind of the most highly valued linebacker right now, because he can play a multitude of positions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is what they're looking for. Not only can you be good at, one position, but are you good enough to play both and have a complete, understanding of the defense? And I think when you talk about Bowen, Osbury, Snead as guys who are potentially going to play this year, I honestly just think it's going to come down to who can do that the best. Who's going to be the guy that can be, Jac Kaiser. He can play the Mike, he can play the Will, he can play the Rote. Like, wherever you need them to plug in, it's basically positionless linebackers.
Yeah. And
that's all I had.
Well, one of the differences that Bullough also talked about this year to last year is because J.D. Bertrand and Maris Leofau had been in the system already for a year, and you could throw Kaiser in there to an extent, but those two more specifically is who he was talking about. Is like they're that took a lot of responsibility. It kind of helped him sort of get his feet wet. Now those guys are gone, and Kaiser is that veteran, and I think that's really important, kind of in this transition as they go forward with this defense. And then, so by the time Kaiser is gone a year from now, you're going to have a whole new group of guys who have also been in the system for a couple of years. And, really, again, just kind of be able to keep that transition going. And I think it's going to help them just in terms of their own learning process for these younger guys to kind of, keep it going.
Yeah, after Kaiser moves on, you could really say that Bullough is going to be responsible for the linebacker success, because he's getting all of these younger guys, that were like, he's inherited Snead, and he's got, Osbury and Bowen were in his first year, and now you're going to add another good linebacker class. I'm just saying, like, going forward, I think linebacker success is going to be largely dictated around Bullough now. Like, that's his responsibility.
Yeah. And his success, well, how he is judged in terms of success or failure is probably going to be predicated on what we see from Jalen Snead this year in terms of the fans' eyes. Right? Like, probably not too far off from that.
Hope not.
Fill in the blank. It's blank that NBC has replaced Jac Collinsworth as the Notre Dame football TV play-by-play announcer with veteran Dan Hicks.
It's about damn time that he got replaced, because those booths were incredibly bad last year. And I know you guys don't often have to, deal with it because you're up in the press box yourself. But I know if you're rewatching the game, you might catch it, or whatever might be going on, where maybe it's like the Shamrock Series game where you might see them, but they're just bad. And it's about time that Collinsworth is gone.
He's bad.
Because he's just, it's just, you want excitement. This is still Notre Dame football. This wasn't Notre Dame football didn't deserve to be Jac Collinsworth test pilot, these first couple of years. And I think that's fair to say. Like, Notre Dame deserves better than a first-time guy who's testing out, how he is in terms of, play-by-play.
I completely agree. I was going to say about time, but I agree with Jesse that it is about damn time, because I do feel like with some of these moves that NBC is making, now a lot of it has to do with the fact they've got the Big Ten and some of the other things, but I feel like some of the moves that NBC is making, they're making Notre Dame more of a priority. So I feel like the negotiation for the extension with Notre Dame and NBC, I think it was part of the negotiation. Like, look,
it's coincidental that after the extension, they're getting some better crews back in there.
This is what I'm saying.
We went from Tarico to freaking Jac Collinsworth.
Like, you need to make Notre Dame a priority when it comes to your announcers. This isn't the minor leagues of Sunday Night Football. Like, you need to step up, and I think they're doing it. And not only are they bringing him in, but then if Notre Dame is considered like the big game, right? They're going to be bringing in even better guy. Like, I just think they're making Notre Dame more of a priority, which thank God.
Yeah, I mean, and look, Dan Hicks, I've heard some people say, oh, he's boring. I guess everyone's just going to have their own personal opinion on the whole thing. Dan Hicks has been around for a long time. He's filled in over the years before. I think he's been with NBC for like 30 plus years himself now at this point. The main thing I know him for, if you watch the Summer Olympics especially, Dan Hicks and Rowdy Gaines are always doing the swimming events. And I thought he's always done a great job doing the Olympic swimming. I like
him on the PGA Tour. That's where I more know him for.
See, I don't watch golf, so that that's just.
I knew that wouldn't do anything for you. I recognize the face immediately because of golf. That's where I drew my connection.
So I think it's going to benefit the product. But look, where this thing broke down, I think, was, do you remember after the Notre Dame USC game, because it was in prime time and you've got two, top highly ranked teams. Were they both top 10 at that point? In any case, they were both like right up there. They were both highly ranked.
They're both
teams.
undefeated. So you can say that.
That's right. They were undefeated.
Yeah.
Highly ranked at Notre Dame, prime time, the whole thing. There were a lot of people watching that game. And there had obviously been some fan scrutiny, to some degrees. We had talked about it on this show, just the inexperience that Jac Collinsworth had. But in a primetime game like that, national media just jumped all over it because there were a lot. You had Caleb Williams, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, who was still in a Heisman race at that point.
Yep.
And it just blew up from national media who covered this thing, just how bad the whole situation was and the lack of inexperience that Collinsworth had. And look, I don't want to dance on his grave or whatever. And, one thing, it's not a grave because he's been demoted. He still works at NBC. He's still going to, he's still going to work, do his stuff for the NFL and that kind of stuff. You don't have to worry about that. His dad still works there, so that's going to be fine. But I just think the Notre Dame product is going to be a lot better with a veteran like Dan Hicks calling the shots. I think it's going to be really good for them. And I think it's going to be good for Jason Garrett as well, which we'll get into more into here in just a second. But I did see the comment, the other part of this is Dan Hicks has been married to Hannah Storm for a long time, who is a Notre Dame grad.
Yep.
So,
she works for ESPN, right?
She does. She was with CNN back in the day is where I first remember her, before she went to when we were, I think I've talked about this before, when I was overseas in the Army, we got the CNN feed. This was in 1989 to 91. And I think Dan Hicks was there as well, but you had those two, was it Fred Hicks or Fred Hickman who was there, and Van Earl Wright. If you ever listened to Van Earl, that was and she was part of that crew as well. But she's obviously been at ESPN for a long time, and so that's however much that may be factored into it, I don't know, but I think it's going to be a good move all the way around. I really do.
And I've got plenty of thoughts on Jason Garrett, so I'm going to save them.
Like I said,
question.
Like I said, I think the last time we really talked about Collinsworth, you don't have to be the best, and this is probably right after Notre Dame USC. You don't have to be the best play-by-play announcer, but you can't be sitting down at the bottom of the list in a job like that when you're on network TV and every game is nationally broadcast. And Dan Hicks is going to be, at the very least, closer, middle to the top of the list than
100%.
sitting at the bottom.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. So, college football writer Stuart Mandel of The Athletic tweeted, "That team was awful last season." Speaking of Collinsworth and Jason Garrett. He says, though Garrett, who always sounds like he's in a library, was worse than Collinsworth. Do you guys buy or sell that?
That's a huge sell. That's a huge sell. And here's the thing. Would you rank Jason Garrett in like the top 10, color guy or, no, probably not. But here's the thing. And I've said something along these lines before, and I'll say it again. A color guy, a lot of times, is only as good as this play-by-play guy.
Right.
And I'm telling you right now, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater just yet. Let's see how Jason Garrett does with a professional play-by-play guy who has experience and knows how to bring along a color guy. I think that maybe Jason Garrett is just bad. I don't know. He didn't bother me, but let's see how he does with a professional play-by-play guy. I guarantee people are going to be singing a different tune.
Yeah, Vince took a lot of the words right out of my mouth. Jason Garrett can really only be as good as Jac Collinsworth at times, right? And if you have a guy that is slow maturing in his own way and is also kind of shackling you along the way, there's not a lot that you can do if you're in Jason Garrett's shoes. And if we want to talk about Jason Garrett specifically, I don't mind him because I still love me as a viewer or consumer of the game. I like a guy that's going to give you more of the X's and O's breakdown, or, the kind of more of like the football philosophy behind things. Right. And I think Jason Garrett does do a good job of that at times. But if we're looking at a scale of, Jason Garrett is on one end and Tony Romo is on the other end, I would like Jason Garrett to be a few notches better. But really, how can we evaluate that when he hasn't worked with anyone but Jac Collinsworth? So I do think he's going to be much better this season.
Right.
And I enjoy his football knowledge.
Right. And I know we talked about this as well. You basically had two rookies going into the booth at the same time. And that's just it's a losing proposition.
It's just foolish that the
on national TV especially.
That.
Again, it's one thing if you're going to do it on ESPN Plus or the USFL or whatever. And I will say that in a few years, if Jac Collinsworth keeps pursuing play-by-play and he has other play-by-play opportunities and he works at it and he wants to get better, I do think he can get better down the road. He just lacks the reps right now,
which is why he shouldn't be thrown at Notre Dame
like he had. Yeah, and he was in no position to help Jason Garrett because he was not a Dan Hicks who had been there before, or name your play-by-play announcer who had a lot of experience. That's what Jason Garrett needs. And I still think there are some things like Jason Garrett is still a little bit stiff. He is a little bit robotic and stuff like that. But what you hope is you've got a veteran play-by-play announcer with him now in the booth, and you hope that a guy like Dan Hicks, because of his experience, can help bring that out of Jason Garrett. Because I do think that there is a lot of ceiling still for Garrett. I do not think that he was worse than Collinsworth, to Stuart Mandel's point. I think that there's still a lot of upside for Jason Garrett. And let's see if having somebody with more experience, again, can kind of help bring that out of him. Brent, you are looking live at Rapid Fire tonight. Good to have you.
Ooh, well done,
Mr. Monterey. There were a couple of comments that I wanted to get to here. I like this from DK. Gingers don't know football. He must be
ouch.
He must be talking to Shay in Irving or something. But Carlos said he'd like to see Todd Blackledge and Noah Eagle do our games moving forward, not just the ones NBC sees as big, because you will still, like last year, remember they did the Notre Dame Ohio State game, and they'll still do, I think, especially the ones with if there are Big Ten connections, they'll probably drop in there. But those guys are considered the prime time,
Right.
the Big Ten package. They're the prime time guys, so that's why they have that gig. So they're essentially the number one college football crew for NBC.
Right. And so they'll do some Notre Dame games, but they're not gonna use those guys for like Miami of Ohio. Like that's just not going to happen, because there's going to be other bigger games that you're going to want those guys there for. So you'll get them probably twice a year, depending on, home and away and all that stuff. So, if they're away at a Big Ten game, that's always a possibility, but more than likely it'll be a home game. But hey, twice a year is better than zero. So I'll take it.
TD4ND wants to know if Max Bullough can recruit. We were obviously just talking about Max Bullough. I mean, he was a GA last year. He's never had to recruit. So we'll find out. Like, you don't find out until it happens. The good part of this thing is you still have Marcus Freeman, who is the point man for everybody. Like, all these comments that you see, like a lot of these new guys that have come in, Marcus Freeman was actively involved in their recruitment from the beginning. And so, again, a lot of these guys talked about it, even though like a Chris O'Leary left, or some of these, Jared Parker left. They talked about, I still had a really good relationship with Marcus Freeman, and he was one of the first guys who was in there contacting me. So I think that's the most important thing. And again, that can only help a young guy like Bullough, who's recruiting for the first time.
Yep.
And you got Chad Bowden in there as well.
Exactly. That was going to be my point. Yeah.
Involved as he is.
100% agree with that. And I like what he thinks his strategy is going to be, just being direct and telling guys like it is. And I think that's a great way to get started, and then you've got to kind of alter your pitch depending on who you're talking to and things like that. And he'll learn that along the way. He's a young coach, he's a young coach. So we'll see how it goes.
Yep. Mark says Mike Mayock was the best at Notre Dame. I mean, I liked him a lot as well. What NBC, apparently, I've read, there were a few articles about this a few years back before Mayock took that job with the Raiders. What pushed Mayock out of that booth was he really, he's a big jargon guy, like deep XO type stuff. And guys, coaches love it.
Loved it.
Broadcast TV, you're talking to a large general audience, and NBC didn't like that. They wanted him not necessarily to dumb it down, but just, like the 3x3 formation and stuff like that. Well, there's not a lot of moms and, grandmas and grandpas who necessarily all know what a 3x3, they needed a little less jargon is some of the stuff that I've heard. And that's ultimately what led to Mayock being gone.
You've got to appeal to the lowest common denominator. You're not, and I don't mean that like in a negative way. I just say you're not at a coaches convention where you're listening to another coach talk.
You're not doing chalk talk.
Right. And I get it. I just, as a coach, I liked hearing that stuff more than the other stuff, like rare is it that a color guy says something. I'm like, oh man, missed that.
I think that's any coach's criticism in general of analysts during games,
right,
is like they think that sometimes they're too fluffy and they're not specific, and and they're too cliche, basically. Well, you're a coach. I mean, you literally sit there and crunch film and do all your X's and O's and everything else. So of course you're going to, like, you've got essentially a master's degree in football, where most people are still working towards their bachelor's degree or high school diploma in football, and it, again, that goes back to like all the criticism of Tony Romo. You've got an audience of pushing 130 million, where more than 100 million are just casual fans.
Yeah.
I've got no problem with the kind of job that Tony Romo did during the Super Bowl. I think he did a perfect job for what was called for. So college football players who opt into the new EA Sports Football 25 game are going to receive $600 and a copy of the game as their compensation. Do you buy or sell that as enough?
I was on the fence with this. I'm just going to say sell, because I think you could be greedy. I think a good solid number is $1,000 and a free game. But that's just me. Like, I know that that's a lot, right? Because you're adding $400 extra times however many extra players there are. So like, that's a lot of money. But at the end of the day, it is better than nothing. They could have got completely nothing. And so that I do think that you should be, and maybe that's a generational thing, be grateful for what you are given. And so, yeah, I think, some sort of money and the game is a pretty good trade-off.
It's a buy for me. I mean, it's $600 more than they got before, and they get a copy of the game. So it's like $650-$60. I think that's fantastic. I would. Who here would not take $600 free and a video game? Like, I would take that in a heartbeat because, like Jesse said, they don't have to use the name, image, and likeness of the players. They can just
go
put
with a generic player,
which they've done all. I mean, see, like in the past, they, obviously they had the same numbers and all that stuff. They don't have to do that. Like, they could have put, like, Riley Leonard's probably is going to be number 13, right? They could have had number 14 as the quarterback. Like, they could have gone a different route with this, and then the players get bupkis. I think this is just fine.
Because they do have to opt into this. And Jalen Daniels, I did see this today. Jalen Daniels, the Kansas quarterback, who was injured for a good deal of this past season, but he has opted into this thing. And I saw that one of these sports business guys talk about $600 does not seem like a lot of money. Where did I just see this here a second ago? I kind of like Johnny's idea, $600 free game in a gaming system. Like, I think that would make a lot of sense, like throwing the gaming system as well. But these guys are going to raise their profile by being part of this game as well.
They get a lot of exposure.
So even though it's $600 right now, it's going to give them even more of an opportunity to make more NIL dollars by raising the profile that they, whether it's NIL or, other sponsorships and stuff like that as they go forward, as people play them in the game and that kind of thing.
I mean, they're giving out $600, right? So that's, and a game. So they've got to sell how many games to make $600, right? You got to sell 12 games, 13 technically, right? Because they're about $50. So you got to sell 13 games for every single player in the NCAA in order to break even. Am I wrong with my math?
Jesse, check his math.
That sounds right.
So, like, you got to sell a hell of a lot of video games to make an excessive amount of money if you're EA Sports. Right now, they're going to sell a bunch of video games. Don't get me wrong, but you're paying out a lot of money is the point that I'm getting at. You're paying out a lot, and you're going to have to sell even more games. So, they are putting their neck on the line a little bit on this. And I know how excited everybody is about it, but, you're also paying all the people to create it, and you're paying the people to be on it and all these different things. So they're sticking their neck out to a degree. I think $600 is a lot of money per player. I mean, what is it, 120 players per
I think 1,000,
team?
like an even 1,000 sounds pretty good. Because I think this whole thing made something like 80 million, the last time. Okay. Like that was like the net profit or something like that the last time they were doing. Let me see if I have that number. Yeah. So there are over 11,000 FBS college football players, meaning EA will spend $6.6 million on NIL deals. Now that's assuming everybody opts in for a game that was doing 80 million in annual sales before it was discontinued. And you expect with inflation that it's going to be doing even more than that as well. So okay,
80 compared to 6.6, they're still doing just fine. So maybe you could have upped it to $1,000 and it wouldn't have hurt them.
But I generally agree with what you're talking about, Vince. 600 in a game is still more than what you were allowed to get 10 years ago.
Right.
So
that's progress.
It's a start, and again, it raises your profile. It does nothing but raise your profile.
You don't have to do anything for it. You're just allowing them to use you in a video game.
Yeah,
that's right.
They get $600 in a video game for breathing, for being on a roster. Cool.
Like a signing bonus.
Right.
It's like, that's awesome. I think that's awesome.
Right. I think Mark won. Thanks for the super chat, Mark won. But it looks like you've been drinking cocktails this afternoon while
he's flying through that super chat.
That's right. He's coming to some game, it looks like, and wants to know if we're tailgating. So
his son got tickets to the first home game. Ben? Are you guys? We are flying. Are you guys tailgating?
The first home game.
Oh, okay.
So that's, gosh, which game is that? Her first home game would be in Northern Illinois on September 7th.
Right.
My guess is he Brian
Probably
will
won't
not
be
be
a tailgate
tailgating.
for Northern Illinois. It's usually the bigger game
Yeah.
that he does tailgates.
I would imagine Louisville, Florida State.
But if you
Yeah.
tailgate and you're, willing to provide the right things,
we'll show up.
we'll show up.
That's all we need. My appearance fee is not $600.
Yep.
It is food and beverages.
Yep.
Food and beverages. And
One drink and one taco for
I
Now-
go heavier on the beverages when I tailgate than the food. So just throwing that out there.
I don't know if anybody from EA Sports like watches the show, but I'm going to throw this out there anyway. I think if you really want it to be an immersive experience, you need to pay
Big word.
us $600 in a video game, and then you have us like break down that week's games.
Ooh, I like it.
Like a week to week in like a franchise mode or whatever.
Here's Coach D.
Yeah, man.
You are looking live at
Yeah.
Instadario breaking down EA 25.
We're here for it. This little triumvirate right here. We can break down the week's games. Let's go. I'm in.
So, on the subject of this game, they're going to have a lot of the ESPN voices on, like Brent Musburger, John, Madden, those as the announcers basically. So Chris Fowler, Kirk Herbstreit, Desmond Howard, Reese Davis among the personalities. David Pollock, who was let go by ESPN more than a year ago, is going to be on it as well. Fair or foul that David Pollock is still going to be in the game when he's not on the TV show anymore.
I gotta go with foul just because of that reason. He's no longer with the crew. I just don't know. I think bigger picture is how do I feel about the rest of the gang that's still there. I think you could have cut it short at like 3 people. I think you could have had like.
So you're saying keep Desmond out?
Keep Desmond out. Keep Pollock out. I think you could get away with like Reese, Herbstreit, and like one more. I honestly, I know this might sound crazy. I wouldn't mind a little like Pat McAfee interference here or there. I would rather have Pat McAfee than David Pollock, and I think that would
rather
make
have
more
Corso
sense.
than David Pollock. And I know Vince is down on Corso,
Well,
but like you can get Corso in the freaking studio and have him record a few different lines.
Yes.
And
Look,
I think that would be great.
the video game version of Lee Corso, putting on the head and doing all that's fine. It's the live.
Let's be honest. You could use AI and capture some Corso voice from about 10 or 15 years ago. That's
Thank you.
Like
it's the Weekend at Bernie's version that I don't really enjoy. I'll take the video game version. That's fine because I do think that shtick is funny and fun, especially on the video game. So I'd be cool with that. But I think I saw on there that like Jesse Palmer and like all these different people are going to be on this game. Like, dude, way too many.
Yeah,
they've got way too many people on that show to begin with. You don't need to bring them all over into the game. It's excessive. It's too much. It's too much.
I agree. I saw Holly Rowe is upset
say the same
that there's
thing.
not enough female representation in
She's
this.
not
And unfortunately,
wrong,
there's not a whole lot of
but-
no, she's not. But at the very least, you could have Holly Rowe, the sideline reporter,
Sure.
right? Like,
Sure.
do something like that. But like if you're looking at game day specifically, though, there's not a whole lot of there is female representation. I'm not saying there's no female representation. Sure. It's kind of turned over the last few years, and it's not like it's more specific to a game day show than it is like a football game.
Right.
But there are sideline reporters in football
Mhm.
games, and a high percentage of them are female. So I have to agree with what Holly Rowe is saying to that degree. Like, seems like you could, interject some sideline reporters in this game. But
I think Holly's got a good point.
Yeah.
And it's inundated with way too many voices. And unfortunately, all those actual voices in real life are the male voices. It's just they added so many that it makes it very male dominated. And they didn't need to add that many.
I would rather see Holly Rowe over David Pollock too.
Yeah.
100%.
And Jesse Palmer.
Hollywood
and
had a
Jesse
problem
Palmer.
if it was just like a 2-man booth and they just had like Herbstreit, nobody would have cared about that because that's who's in the booth, right? So, but I agree with her. There's just too many faces, too many. It's too much. It's overkill.
I concur. Okay, so yesterday was the 44th anniversary of the Miracle on Ice and Al Michaels' famous "Do You Believe in Miracles" call. Do you want me to bring that up right now? Go ahead and start with that. Kind of give us a flavor here. Let me see if I can find it. I should have labeled these a little bit different so they were easier to find.
Is this my segue out?
Well, hang on just a sec.
Whoa.
Hang on just a sec. Here we go.
10 seconds. The countdown going on right now. Morrow up to Schultz. 5 seconds left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
All right. Do you believe in miracles? Yes. And so that led us to this conversation of, is that the greatest sports call of all time? And we were in a little text chain this afternoon trying to come up with our own suggestions. Which one was yours, Jesse?
So I had a couple that came to mind. I texted you about one. I always remember the Kirk Gibson one where he hits the home run off of like one leg in game 1 of the World Series.
Yep.
I remember the one that Vince brought up of the Auburn return against Alabama.
Right.
And I think another one I think of that might not be as popular is, do you remember the Stephon Diggs catch in the playoffs and then he caught, it was with the Vikings. And I think they were playing the Saints or someone a few years ago, and he caught on the last play of the game. He walked it off with a touchdown. Those are the three that I thought of.
Okay.
And Gibson would be my overall answer at the end of the day, because
like even more.
Of course,
even more so.
A road that I didn't have calls for, right? So here's the thing about the Gibson home run to me is you had two of the all-time greats calling that game. Jack Buck on radio, Vin Scully on TV doing the same game. So you've got two distinctly different calls for each medium. And luckily for us, I've got both of them. So
luckily for us.
Here's Jack Buck on radio calling Kirk Gibson's dramatic home run, the 1988 Game 1 World Series off Dennis Eckers.
Swings and a fly ball to deep right field. This is going to be a home run. Unbelievable! A home run for Gibson. And the Tigers have won the game 5-4. I don't believe what I just saw. I don't believe what I just saw.
The great Jack Buck, the late great Jack Buck, of course, Joe's father. That's pretty good call.
That's pretty
right
solid.
There. I don't believe what I just saw.
Pretty solid.
Can't be beat.
It can be, and it was, but that's okay.
Can it be beat, though? Because then you've got Vin Scully calling the game on TV. Drastically different, but still very good in its own right. So let's have a look.
Fly ball into right field. She is gone. In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened.
That's a great finish right there.
So I obviously let it play, and everyone's wondering, like, are they going to say something? Like, that's the difference between radio and TV,
yes.
basically. If you want to know, that was back-to-back, the exact same home run, Jack Buck on radio, Vin Scully on TV, Vin laid out for over a minute. Let the crowd noise and the pictures tell the story. Both great calls in their own right, but both completely different, obviously.
I like the Vin Scully call. I just like Vin Scully better. I think that's probably what it is. His voice and the way he can frame a moment and paint the picture, even though it's TV. I just think, there's nobody better than him.
I agree.
I would take his call, even though there was so much silence. I would take his call over the Buck call.
Jesse, which one are you on?
I'm on the first
radio,
call.
Vin Scully TV.
I like the TV one.
So the second one.
Whatever one Buck did. Sorry.
That would be the first one.
That was the radio call. Again, the TV call was the long silence with all the crowd noise.
Okay, then yeah.
Words. So, all right. Well, Jesse's going to bail on us, so he's going to leave.
Goodbye, everyone.
See you later. Got to do his thing. I don't know. One of those two. Like, how do you compare that to the Miracle on Ice, though? For example?
I guess for me,
it's tough, man.
It's the Miracle on Ice for me. Okay, and here's the reason why. Because and this is a personal opinion. The Miracle on Ice was USA. Like it was just a bigger moment, and I feel like the call echoed the moment. And so because the moment was bigger, the call ended up feeling bigger. And I do feel like the call met the moment. I do feel like the call met the moment. And since the moment was bigger, that's what I go for. They're all really good. Miracle on Ice, man, is number one for me all day.
Brent wants to know why I didn't mention the catch.
Oh, I wonder why.
Are you talking about the Butch Johnson Super Bowl 12 diving catch where he crosses the goal line and the ball's on the ground when he gets up? Is that the catch you're talking about, Brent?
Not catch.
All right, I've got a few other all-time greats. I generally think the Miracle on Ice has got to be at the top, like especially when you talk, because everyone's got their own favorite teams. Like Brent was talking about, the Dodgers are, this and that. And so like, if you hate the Dodgers, you're not going to think nearly as much of Kirk Gibson.
Sure.
Whatever team it happens to be. But as Americans and the Miracle on it, like it kind of brings everybody together.
Yeah.
So I think that for me, that's got to be up there at the top. So where are the others that I had? So this is one that I grew up with.
Okay.
That, like, I think, especially before the Gibson home run, was one of the most, if not the most famous call of all time. I think it's changed a little bit over time. But this is Bobby Thompson. They're going crazy, Vince. Did you grow up, like, was that a familiar call to you when you were growing up in the 80s?
I had never heard it until you sent it to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I hate to say it.
Interesting. So you sent me this one, Joe Carter's home run from the 1993 World Series.
Pitch on the way, a swing and a belt. Left field, way back. Blue Jays win it. The Blue Jays are World Series champions as Joe Carter hits a 3-run home run in the 9th inning, and the Blue Jays have repeated as World Series champions. Touch 'em all, Joe. You'll never hit a bigger home run in your life.
Well, that's a pretty good call. And that's Toronto Blue Jays radio there.
Yeah, so the reason I picked that one, so that was the 93 World Series. I was 12 years old, and I was up in my room. I remember watching it. It was late, obviously. I was in bed, and I had this little, like, 4-inch TV that just got, like, air channels, right? And it was, like, super long, but it had a little screen, and I would watch, like, Monday Night Football and things like that. And I was watching this game in my bed, and it's one of the first calls I remember, like, actually watching. And I remember him saying, touch them all, Joe. And I remember thinking that was a really cool call. Like, I remember that from my youth, you know what I mean? And so that's really when I got into sports, and I was like 10, 11, 12 years old, because that's right around the time of the 93 Notre Dame team, all these different things. So that's where I was really getting into sports. And so I just remember watching that. I wasn't like a Blue Jays fan or anything, but I just remember that touch 'em all, Joe. And I thought that was a really cool call in the moment. That's not something you can prepare for. You know what I mean? It was a really cool call in the moment.
Yep. Got some people nominating TD for ND says the Rocket run back, the Tony Roberts.
Tony Roberts is a friggin' gem. Like he has so many great calls. I mean, it's hard to, like, when they beat Florida State, Notre Dame is
number one. Yep.
Like that's the one that echoes in my head, obviously, as well. So, Tony Roberts I remember seeing him for the first time, like in person, when I first started going up in the press box. I was starstruck. Absolutely starstruck. Tony Roberts is the GOAT. It's awesome.
I agree. DK wants some of my calls. Go to the Notre Dame women's game, and like right before the game starts, if you see like their little highlight reel up there, I'm very fortunate to still be included in
Yes.
It always kind of like gets me focused when the game's getting ready to start, and I hear that they play the call from the 2001 national championship.
Oh, do they really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
nice.
Been to a game in a while.
I went to a few like in the first half of the season, but I haven't been really in the second half of the season. It just hasn't lined up.
The video that they play with like all the highlights from past years and stuff like that. It's the first call. There, there's like some video and it leads up to it, and they play what is it? Notre Dame is the national champion. I was a little more excited than that when when I called it. But here is Howard Cosell with a famous call.
Angie Dundee, Ali's trainer, right next to me, is saying it. You may hear him. Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! The heavyweight champion is taking the mandatory 8 count, and Foreman is as poised as can be in a neutral corner.
Down goes Frazier. Vince has got that look on his face like you've never heard that call before.
I have heard that one. No, I have heard that one. Obviously, I'm not a boxing fan per se, but I have heard down goes Frazier. Like, I definitely heard that one before. Yes, 100%.
Yeah. That was, that's another one. Again, like that's from the 1970s, but it's one, we kind of grew up on. And I remember I was actually doing a Notre Dame baseball game several years ago. And you remember Frazier, was it Jeff Frazier? There were 2 Fraziers who played for Rutgers. One of them played for the Cincinnati Reds and the Yankees for a long time.
Yep.
And a Notre Dame pitcher struck him out, and someone kind of, dared me to do a down goes Frazier thing. And so I worked that in there.
Well done.
Didn't go full Cosell, but that was fun. The down goes Frazier.
I like it.
All right. Are there any more? I think we've played most of them. Are there any more that you want to hear before we wrap it up?
Jesse already brought up the Auburn, Alabama one, and I don't know how great of a call it was, as opposed to how great of a moment,
great moment.
I guess it was. Yeah. The Carter one is way better for me, But I was like, I got to come up with something that is not like off the, I wanted to come up with something off the beaten path a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So that's why I threw that one at you. But the Carter one for me is one I'll always remember.
Here's one more Vin Scully that I think is one of the more iconic calls.
3-2 to Mookie Wilson. Little roller up along first, behind the bag. It gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Mets win it.
And again, you get the classic Vin Scully, making a great call and then just laying out and let the crowd noise and the shots on the screen tell the picture afterwards. He was a master class at doing that.
Is it wrong? And this is going to age me in the wrong direction, probably. But is it wrong when I hear Vin Scully and all I can think of is For Love of the Game?
That's true.
I'm just saying.
That's true. Brent, by the way, says the catch Montana to Clark at the end of the Cowboys Dynasty, I know that that's what you were talking about. But Vin Scully was actually doing that game, I believe, on NBC.
Oh, really?
That playoff game. Yeah. The catch. Vin Scully
I did not know that.
did that. Yep.
But yeah, I always think of that. I always think of him announcing that for love of the game, man. Like, cause he's very poetic, and it like fit perfectly for that rom-com, essentially.
And the cathedral, the Yankee Stadium.
A chapel.
A chapel.
I mean, but that's not unlike something he would say.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure somebody wrote that for him. I'm sure of it. But like, that is so something he would say during a broadcast. So, yeah.
Yep. Good trip down memory lane. And again, yesterday, the 44th anniversary of the Miracle on Ice. That's why we pulled those out today.
It happened the year I was born, but almost a year before I was born, because I believe it was January of 1980, if I'm not mistaken, or February. It was February of 1980, and I wasn't born until December. So, but that's how I always remember the Miracle on Ice. It was the year I was born.
Yeah.
So,
Craig wants to know: are baseball announcers better, or baseball has more drama for iconic calls? I will say,
hit it
in the postseason, especially because of the fact that you have so much time in between calls, and then you've got the pitch, and just that, think about that. Gibson and Mookie Wilson, very similar in that each batter fouled off several pitches before, the big moment came. For Gibson, it was obviously the home run. For Mookie Wilson, it was just the dribbler up the first baseline. But in each case, they fouled off pitch after pitch, and the tension mounts, and you've got the crowd going louder. And when they're doing it on TV, they're panning to all those different crowd shots and like the dugout shots, and people biting their nails and all that different stuff. And there's just so much buildup, and I think baseball is definitely built for it because you have just those specific individual moments, and when you're on that stage, whether it's the World Series or wherever, playoffs, whatever it happens to be, those announcers are the kind of guys who are ready for those moments more times than not.
Yeah, I just think I have a lot more respect for baseball announcers because there is so much time to fill in a baseball game that is completely different than any other sport. Any other sport. There's no clock associated, obviously, with baseball. I mean, they got the pitch clock, but you know what I mean. And so I've always been amazed. Like when I would do baseball games with you, you had your binder of like info and you would just like flip to something. And I mean, the preparation it takes to do a baseball game, I think is unlike any other sport. And because you don't want to use all your stuff up front,
right?
And you want to space it out and you got to find the right moment. It just, I don't know. I have a lot of respect for guys who do baseball.
Well, and that's the thing to me, like you'll hear some baseball guys who just, they've got their information and their stats and their notes or whatever. And just what you were talking about, like they'll regurgitate all out the first time a guy comes up, where it's like you prepare all this stuff and you want to have information to meet different moments over the course of the game. And sometimes you're not going to use all the information, but you're exactly right. It's like, you got to kind of save it.
Right.
In case that moment comes up and not, just spit it out in the first inning, the first time they come to the play.
Well, and the great thing about baseball is there's probably a game the next day. And so you can save that nugget or whatever for the next game and be just fine.
That's right. That's right. I was blessed back in the day as well to have a sports information director who overwhelmed me sometimes.
This is true.
So I had almost all the information I ever wanted. So
this is true. I mean, that binder was so full of info.
I know.
But I also remember on your score sheet, because you kept score by hand, obviously, and you had little stats like next to each guy's name, and every time you would do one, you would tick it off, so you wouldn't hit it again. I mean, it's very organized, and like I learned a lot, man. I'm telling you.
Had a system. Everyone's got their own system. I'm
you're
not
right.
telling you my system's right, but
no, you're right.
Everyone's got their own system, and that's the cool thing about baseball as well, is with as many announcers as there are, each person does have their own style and their own way of doing things. There's no one specific way to do it, as long as you say the score as much as possible, and meet the moment whenever the moment arises. I think those are the two most important things.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for
All
tonight
right.
and for this week. So we will be back Monday. And I'm sure we'll have, I saw some, like asking about, we'll have some more specific football comments from Mike Denbrock. Let's put it
Okay.
that way. Wanted to kind of get, some of the other stuff in today, but someone was asking about, him talking about 11 personnel and stuff like that. So we'll get to more X and O type stuff, I think, next week from some of the stuff that we heard from Mike Denbrock. So,
all right.
Looking forward to that. Well, Jess is already gone. Appreciate everybody showing up today. DK says rapid fire question mark. I don't know what that's about. I mean, we just did an hour and 20 minutes.
Come on, man.
How many topics did we have?
Man.
Come on, DK. Get with it. I didn't see Ryan Roberts' forehead in here tonight, though.
But Ryan Roberts was.
Oh, was he? I didn't see him.
He just said hi, and then I don't know if he bailed or what. But
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hi, Ryan. Hi to Ryan Roberts' forehead if you happen to pop in somewhere as well. Hit the like button before you leave. And, of course, subscribe, rate, and review. And have a great weekend. We'll talk to you Monday on IB Nation Sports Talk.